All right, welcome everyone. We're just going to wait a minute for everyone to join. All right. Well, welcome everyone to Cleared for Takeoff, Planes, Trains, and Student Visas. We're really excited to be chatting to you today about all things heading across the pond or wherever you may be internationally. Just to start, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Sarah Keniston. I am an admissions officer with University College Dublin. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm excited to speak to you today.
And my name is Amanda Lunberg, and I'm with the University of Roehampton, London, in the UK, regional manager for the Americas, and I'm based in Southern California, just outside Los Angeles.
Hi, everybody. My name is Haley Drogus. I am the in-country recruitment rep, international officer for the University of Sheffield, and I am remotely based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. All right, so jumping right into the agenda, and thank you all for attending. I hope it's been a great week so far. For the agenda, we will be going over today securing student visas, booking international flights, planning arrival logistics, preparing for life abroad, resources to help families as well through navigating international studies, as that can always be a concern for the families and parents as well. Great. Now looking at jumping right in, the timeline. So we find that it's really useful to have a timeline and really get an idea of, what a student will go throughout the process. So for the key steps in applying and becoming an international student, around September to October, a student will be able to apply to the university. So that's really when most applications open, very similar to the US university structure. And then in terms of receiving a decision, this can really vary. So you're going to find that a lot of international universities do have rolling admissions, almost, if you will. So if a student applies early, they'll probably receive a decision before the holidays. If not, for example, the UK has an equal consideration deadline that's in January. So if a student applies by that, they'll typically hear back by no later than I'd say April, if not sooner. But again, this could really vary country to country, uni to uni. And then in terms of applying for funding, students can start to apply for things like FAFSA and potentially even scholarships starting in October. And then once a student receives an offer, whether it be conditional or a full offer, we recommend that they do accept said offer as soon as possible. Especially at the undergraduate level, you're going to find that most universities at the undergrad level don't necessarily require a deposit. So students are not financially bound to that acceptance, which is still really useful in case there's any hiccups or changes to be made. And then in terms of obtaining or renewing the passport, once a student is at the point in the stage where they can start to work on passport and then visa, again, that's something that they really want to jump on. I always recommend to students, if they don't already have a passport or it's expiring in the next year, try to apply for that as soon as possible if they are already considering studying outside of the US or wherever they're at.
And then kind of continuing on this timeline, the journey of what students kind of go through. Once they do have that, either a new passport, renewed passport, they want to review the visa requirements, which we're going to look at in just a moment, for that particular country that they're going to, because not every country is the same, and not every country requires them. Shout out to Ireland, who does not require student visas. It also depends on the length of the course too, as well. And then between February and July, students typically start applying for accommodation. That's when you'll also see that they're meeting the conditions of their offer as they're finishing high school, of course, or university if they're coming for postgrad. And then usually around July is when you would start a student visa if you need a visa for that particular country. And then we usually advise students to wait until August to book your flights. Wait till at least you know exactly when you have your visa, so that you know that you're not entering too soon, because you do need the countries that do require the visa. You need to make sure that you have the right dates. And then also in August, you'll begin enrollment. Typically, some of that happens before they arrive, and then the rest of it kind of continues once they're on campus. And they should start packing their bags. So that's kind of the end of the timeline before they actually arrive in country. But looking at securing student visas, as I said, this is really going to vary country to country. A lot of countries, I would say probably the majority, do require students to have visas in order to study. So some of the things that just to keep in mind are student citizenship and nationality. If they have dual citizenship, fantastic, they won't need a visa. As I said before, Ireland, if you're studying in Ireland, you don't need a student visa for that. But you should also just really keep in mind the study destination. So Haley and I both work for universities in the UK, and it's absolutely required for full degrees, but not necessarily for a short-term study abroad program. So the length of the stay also makes a big difference, whether they're there for 6 months or a year. Also the program type, what kind of visa they might need. This might vary from country to country as well. And also to keep in mind, the program provider or the institution might have very specific instructions for student visas. But we always encourage students to contact the local embassy in that country or consulate office, or even their local, state government website here in the U.S. to find out what those visa requirements are. As far as required documents, proof of funds, the main things that you'll need if your student does need a visa, they usually need some kind of a sponsorship from the university. This is called lots of different things. In the UK, it's called confirmation of acceptance of studies. And it's basically saying, it's the university saying that we are approving that they are a legit student, they're coming to study with us, they have an offer. So some kind of sponsorship from the university. They'll need their passport, typically their offer letter, and then the various qualifications that they use to obtain their offer. So the document part is really simple. Money-wise, this is going to vary depending on where students are from, because I know lots of counselors and IECs work with students all over the world, not just the US. So this is going to vary quite a bit as well. So make sure you check with the universities what the financial proof is. So some countries don't need to show any financial proof. We always recommend that you have that on hand just in case, because every government will have the right to ask you for that. But it really varies on the student's nationality. But typically students should show that they have at least the first year's tuition, as well as the cost of living in that particular city and country. And then as well as, information on scholarships, things like that they'll need to show. In some countries, you do have to have a certain amount of money in a bank account for so many days before you can obtain your visa as well. So there's lots of little things here, but there's more than we could probably do a visa webinar all on its own. So make sure you put those questions in the Q&A if you do have them. But ultimately, we always advise that you start as early as possible, even when students are just starting to think about going abroad, to look into this process, because the length of time is going to change wildly.
Right, and then jumping over to booking international flights. We all get this question. I'm sure you even all get the question as well in terms of supporting your students. So when to book? We basically throw back questions at the students. Do you know when campus move-in day is? And have you secured your student visa? So typically these are key factors that we want to keep in mind ahead of a student booking flights. If they are someone who really wants to get their flights booked early, try to save some money, we highly recommend booking the most flexible ticket possible, just to ensure that they aren't having to pay a fortune to change their flights later if something happens. For example, maybe there's a delay on receiving their visa back, as not every country is fully moved over to an e-visa yet. So there are still a lot of steps, of course, with having to mail in passports, receive the vignette in your passport back in the mail, and that can take time. So that's one major component, as well as move-in day. As I said, typically this will be provided not only from the admissions team as a student accepts an offer, but then also from accommodation as well, especially if they're living on campus. So definitely something to consider. And then choosing arrival airports. So what is the closest airport to campus or most accessible? So for example, someone who is moving to the UK, if they're going to central England, would it be better to fly into Manchester? into London. Are trains accessible from both airports to that? If the train length is about the same time, maybe just look at which flight is cheaper or which route has less layovers. So again, it's really going to depend. For that, we highly recommend being able to speak, of course, with the rep for the university, but also try to use, a lot of us have live chat features to speak with our current students, and that can be really beneficial to get in touch with and get advice from international students already at the university. And then luggage allowance and student discounts. So pack what's necessary, buy things like bedding there. That's what most of us recommend. Lots of times they'll even have packages on campus where you can pre-order bedding from the university so that they have it readily available once you arrive. But yeah, just take what's necessary, especially for the upcoming weather, the current and upcoming weather, especially if, you know, most of us have autumn starts apart from perhaps Oceania universities. So really something to consider. What's the weather going to be like upon arrival? Maybe have your family ship the heavy winter coat later on or buy a new one over there. So something to really think about. And then in terms of student discounts, there are a lot of discounts. So it's worth, again, checking with campus, but also those current international students on any tidbits of saving money, whether it be on discounts for the train ticket from the airport or any discounts at local stores to buy things like bedding once over there. And then in terms of flexible ticket options in case of delays in student visas, always purchase the flexible tickets. As I said, this really allows for any hiccups without having to pay a cost difference. So never just book the basic economy or most affordable. It's totally fine if you're heading down to, you know, see friends in Florida for a weekend in the summer, but maybe not so much when you're moving to a whole new country. All right. And then for planning arrival logistics, pre-arranging airport pickups or public transport routes, a lot of us at our universities might have options for meet and greet services where students can potentially pre-register to be picked up in the airport, the closest airport to the university on a designated move-in day, and they can sign up for that, as well as public transit routes. There is such great public transit in countries abroad. So it's really important to be attending those pre-departure webinars. Both students, families, and even counselors are typically open to attend those as long as they have the registration for the pre-departure webinars, and that information is typically covered through that. And then in terms of temporary accommodation, if housing isn't ready, we always recommend getting in touch with the accommodation team. It might be that a student needs to be there early, or the best flight that they could book was maybe 2 days earlier. They might be able to move a student into their room early if they're staying on campus, or provide alternative housing until their room is ready. So we always say, you know, always ask. There are definitely options available. And if not, a lot of us have alternate housing or accommodation available off campus or near campus. So it might be like a university hotel with discounts for students and their families.
And then moving into bringing necessary documentation in your carry-on bag, you want to make sure that you have any of your visa paperwork, usually your offer letter, anything that has your health insurance or your federal aid loans, all of that stuff, pack it in your carry-on. You don't want to deal with either a lost check bag or getting to immigration before you've received your check bag where you don't have that for the officers. Your passport, of course, that's probably the most important to have in your carry-on. And then informing the university of your arrival date. This is typically asked during registration, and it will typically coordinate with the move-in date for the residences, especially if you're a first-year student. So you just want to make sure that you're planning ahead. Everyone knows that you're coming and you are prepared to arrive. All right, and planning for life abroad, cultural adjustment tips and local customs. So I would always say social media is your friend. Use TikTok, Instagram, whatever suits your student best. Look for local creators in the area. What's a good place to live in? What are maybe good shops to explore, whether it's IKEA for your dorm things or Primark or Pennies to get the little bits that you forgot at home. That's a really great way to kind of immerse yourself in the culture before even arriving and prepare yourself for your arrival. Opening a bank account and setting up a phone plan. It's not as scary as you think. Your students will absolutely be able to manage it. 17, 18-year-olds do this every single year. It's a little bit different than the States. It is that extra level of responsibility, but liaise with your reps. We have lots of documents to help you know what you need to bring up to set up your bank account, what you need to set up a phone plan. And there's often student bank accounts that you can get, so students won't get charged for minimums or overdrafts or anything like that. And SIM cards are often given out by student unions at the different colleges as well. So if you want a free SIM card, I would definitely look in that department. Healthcare and insurance, this is also a big thing, and it often has to do with immigration requirements. So again, check with your school to see if there's specific policy plans that are connected with local healthcare companies in that area. I know for UCD, we have different ones that meet the immigration requirements, and all students have to do is sign up. So we try to make it as easy as possible. That really goes for all of the universities. And medications, check for different names in different countries and the legality of what your students are taking in America. Make sure that that is something that can either be brought to, whether it's the UK or France or wherever you're going, or prescribed there, especially if there's some medications that aren't as common. And then connecting with student societies and support services. Both mental and physical health services are available on, I would say, every single international college campus. We really want our students to take care of themselves, like I said, both mentally and physically. And socially, you want to join clubs and societies, get out of your comfort zone. Your students should be making friends. This is kind of the start of a whole new world for them, and making friends and companions is a big part of that. And going into some resources to help families navigate their final steps. Look for parent Facebook pages, WhatsApp groups for students, anything that can connect you with other students either going abroad in general or to your specific university. Communication tools. WhatsApp is most commonly used in the UK, EU, wherever you are. But pro tip, if you don't want to use that, you could always FaceTime audio your student if you don't want to get charged for that international call. Make sure that you guys communicate ahead of time, a way to stay connected and keep each other updated. Yeah, I'll pass it off to Amanda.
Yes, sorry about that. I had a little delay there on my end. Yeah, so finally, just the support networks for international families. You know about us at AIRR-NA because you're here, you're joining us this week. But we do have some fantastic resources too for families, for you as counselors, for the families, for students. So we would say definitely use this QR code here to check out those resources. But some of what's here includes government affiliated sites. There's always going to be a country site for the different education systems in each country. But we also have our member directory so that you can get in touch with each of us that work for international institutions but are based here in North America. So hopefully we're your number one stop for help and for questions. But yeah, these are just a few things to help you guide your students as they start looking at going abroad. And we're kind of closing out now. So if you have any questions, please feel free to pop those into the Q&A and we'll go through them in just a sec. But you've seen this in every single presentation probably, but we really want to nail it so that we make sure that you're coming with us or at least able to come to something that we're doing this next year. So we are holding our annual reception at the NACAC conference. So please be sure to put that on your calendar. We'll have the registration link on our website. We're also doing a Texas tour this year. So if you're in Texas, please do check that out. We'll be hitting all the major cities in Texas this November. And then we'll have our usual East Coast and West Coast tours. So if you're interested in collaborating or hosting us for those tours next year, please do get in touch because we would love to hear, to work with you a little bit more. And with that, we can move over to the Q&A, but thank you so much for joining us again. And we just have a few minutes left here, I think 5 minutes left. And we can go through those questions. Let's see, my questions disappeared. So do you guys have them open?
We did have, sorry, Sarah. I was going to say, we did have one question come through, which I can say out loud again, because it was a great question. So aside from direct consulates and embassies, do you have any recommended resources for looking at visa requirements country to country? So one thing, again, around those resources, things like the British Council for the UK, Education Ireland, if Ireland did require student visas, those type of country-specific education-based organizations and resources, lots of times run by the government of said country, are really beneficial. They have so many different components and pieces of advice available to all. So that is one major resource. Another thing that I recommend is a lot of us, if you know the university, even a university that your student is interested in, or even you work with a lot, lots of times we'll have an immigration page available on our websites for international students, that's public facing, and it will go through a myriad of information in terms of the timeline specifically for the immigration steps, where to complete the application online, other locations of resources beyond consulates and embassies. So we definitely recommend looking on our websites as well.
I would also just add to that. I know this sounds really simple, but with AI being everywhere, you could do a simple Google search and typically the AI answer pops up and gives you links. So I often will, like if I'm not sure about a specific country, I'm a curious person. So I'll say like, do students need visas to study in Japan? I don't know that, but if you pop it in, yeah, you'll definitely find, some good resources and links there as well, as simple as it sounds. But yeah, please do check out our website because we do have we're constantly growing our resources section for counselors, for families and students. Yeah, I think we have one more question. Is that right?
Yep, one
Yeah.
more. I'll say it out loud for everybody. So, do visa requirements usually go smoothly? If not, what is the one most common problem encountered with getting a visa?
Yeah, I can answer this one.
Okay.
I've been working with UK higher education for almost 18 years now, mostly with American students coming over. So I've been through every sort of variation of visa that you can think of. And it's very rare especially for American students to have any trouble with the visa process. It's very rare for them to get rejected. Typically we are, seen as a low risk country. So it's really easy to apply and it's pretty quick to get their decision back as well. I would say the most common problem, if there is a problem with getting a visa, is not having all of the information. So like if they either put their birthday in the wrong way or they didn't include, some vital information on the application itself. But speaking for the UK solely, the application is really straightforward. And typically every university, like Haley said, has guides and step-by-step kind of documentation to help students get through it. So even that is very rare. The biggest problem that I've ever seen, I would say, is just that it might take a little bit longer than normal because there's so many students applying. But we're very lucky in the UK that we switched to e-visas this year, and so they are being processed a lot faster.
Yes.
But yeah.
The only other thing to add to that is I used to be Amanda's counterpart at Roehampton, co-regional managers, and co-regional managers for life, if you will, and no matter where we go. But one time we had a student who, again, this was just, they did not pay attention. They did not read those steps. So this is really where even you all, as their counselors and guiding them through the process, can come into play. Is we had a student right before school started go, all right, so what's my next step? I've got my flights booked. I'm leaving tomorrow. I've got my CAS. And we have a CAS, which is a pre-step that you have to complete for UK visas. And quite a few countries might have a step like that. And we were like, but what about your visa? They're like, well, I have my CAS. So we're like, did you not pay attention? They never applied for the visa. They thought the CAS was the visa. And that's like a prerequisite, if you will, to applying. So again, sometimes it's just reiterating, here are the steps. Here what you need to follow. Always double check so that we can make sure you're good to go and don't try to enter the country without a visa.
Exactly. But yes, I see that we're at time, so I'm going to wrap this up. But thank you so much for joining us, and please reach out if you have any further questions. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.